Hey, good evening, everyone. This is Chuck Hogan with Your Best Life, and welcome to the Spanglish World Network on Zingo TV channels 250 and 251. Please remember to download both the Zingo TV app on the iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure you rate and leave a comment. The app is completely free. Zingo TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire and Fire TV sticks, Roku and Roku sticks, and all TVs 2016 forward. So thank you for joining us tonight. I am uber excited because I get to have someone that I have never had on the show. And he is a man that has a very unique perspective. He's been a professional baseball athlete. He is my executive producer of this show, in addition to also being the CEO and president of a IT company. And so when we start to talk about worldly, when we start to talk about, and that's amongst other things. I mean, he also does play-by-play calls and narration, and is an announcer for professional sports as well, all over the world. So, little things like World Cup, stuff like that. Please welcome to the YBL family, the one, the only Eduardo Harari. Eduardo, thank you for being here, brother. So grateful to have you, man.
Thanks for having me, Chuck. It's always a pleasure being with you. It's always a pleasure in watching YBL. It's an amazing, amazing program, and one of my proudest achievements in getting you to do a show for us.
I thank you for the vote of confidence, and it's been beautiful. We have so many off-camera conversations as well, and so thank you for those robust conversations. I truly enjoy them. I wanted to ask you, Eduardo, in this world that we're living in, because you live in Canada, and you have this amazing Latin heritage that is remarkable, and also you have diversity in religious beliefs as well. As someone who's Japanese and Irish, who grew up Roman Catholic, my wife's from Nicaragua. We we have a potluck of different ethnicities within the Hogan construct, from Mexican to Russian, to even folks dating who are like from Somalia and India. And so it's just remarkable to see all these different, this melting pot, right? So what do you find is the secret sauce to appreciating other people and their diversity? You're someone who's traveled all over the world. I'd love to get your insights so that our viewers at home can get a clear understanding as to, if they're not happy with their government, if they're not happy with their current life conditions, if they're not happy with their spirituality or their health, that they have choices, right? And it's like, but how do we get inquisitive about other people who sometimes we go, oh, those people, like they're the enemy, or they're the people on the other side of the street from us that we're trying to avoid? What would you say to folks that you've used as some references and tools that help you and guide you?
So, thanks for the question, because it's interesting. In my family, and I as a kid, I speak now 11 languages because of family necessities. As a young child, I heard my name mentioned in so many languages. I wanted to know what the hell they were talking about me, and so I started asking my grandmother from my mom's side to teach me something. My great grandmother from my dad's side to teach me other languages, and as I grew, I started to understand what diversity means. Because in my family, my mom's family comes from Austro-Hungary and Romania. My dad's family comes from Syria and the Middle East, but they go together in Latin America. And I said, how does that happen? And it is very strange when you start going at that pace. And one of the things that I learned from a very young age is to understand culture, to understand idiosyncrasies within people. When you grow up in a country like Canada, particularly, we are a melting pot of a multicultural carpet that no one can believe. Within the city of Toronto, we have 197 ethnicities. And one of the things that I enjoy is eating. And what a better way to experience culture than through food, and going to meet the different ethnicities. And you know, I have traveled throughout in my life. My partners, my clients in the business world always tell me that I am a very strange individual because I don't eat at restaurants. I I eat in markets all over the world, and they say you are going to get sick. I said no. That's how you create a foundation for not getting sick, because once you eat there, nothing can attack you anymore.
That's a great concept. But to your point, a lot of people will commune over food, and it's kind of like when I met my wife, Julie Julieta. She had never had sushi before, and it's one of those, sushi is one of those things. If you're not skilled at picking the right sushi, you can have a very off-putting experience. And so we started off very slow, very mellow, and yet we were able to go ahead and cultivate where now she enjoys all types of sushi, and it's just this amazing experience. We have curry. We go to different types of restaurants. My son, my eldest, he's 23 and just graduated from college, and he is like going, oh, let's go to eat Indonesian and Indian and Malaysian, and he'll try anything. I'm like going, okay, whose kid are you? Because like we're pretty adventurous, but you're like, you'll put anything in your mouth. And so to your point, that diversity also comes with a presupposition of no judging. And people go, what, in food? I go, well, let's think about this. Let's say someone has an aversion to someone's ethnicity and they go, I don't like X. And I'm not going to get, specific. I'll just say, but they have no problem eating their food. And I go, whoa, whoa, whoa. Okay, wait a second. How can you not like the ethnicity, but like their food? It's part of their culture. It's part of who they are. And they go, well, come on, Chuck. That's like saying, I don't like Europeans, but I drive XYZ vehicle. And I go, okay, why do I go there? It's all about the meaning we give to certain cultures and things that they're going through. So there's a lot, and I think that we could agree on this, Eduardo. There's a lot of controversy going on in the world right now.
Oh, definitely. I mean, look, one of the things that as I'll go back to my childhood. Uh, I was an unconventional child, and my mom would kindly put it. I like to ride the buses in Latin America, where buses are not normally not uh, where kids don't normally go on their
Right.
own.
Right.
I used to walk, and until this day, I walk the streets of many cities in the world where people say there is danger to walk there. I walk because I feel comfortable, because I don't, the environment will adapt to me,
Mm.
not I will adapt to the environment. Just because it's dangerous, it doesn't mean that someone will attack you. If you are acting normal, nothing will happen to you. If you show off, then hey, anything is bound to happen.
It's very interesting that you say that, because I was having this conversation earlier, and we were talking about how imperative it is to be curious and not so crucial or critical of people, because it's when we start judging that we start to find a whole lot of discomfort. And if you're looking for what's different and you look hard enough, you'll find it. That's just the way our minds work, our reticular activating system. Where we put our focus, that's where that attention is going to go. And so if that sounds confusing to anyone, let me explain real quick. So I want you to imagine your right big toe on your foot, just right now, just for a moment, your right big toe, and wiggle it. And if you're barefoot, what is it touching? What do you feel? If it's in your shoe, what do you feel? If you can put your attention right to your big toe. But if I were to go, what's going on behind you? Unless you're on camera like we are right now, you probably wouldn't know what's going on behind you, because all your attention's on your big toe. This is the way the brain works. And when we start to look at cultures this way, when we start to look at people this way, color, religion, race, creed, politics, food, it becomes very critical because then we start comparing to other things. How do you know it's good or bad? It's a comparison. If you go, Chuck, was that food as good as pizza? And you go, ooh, pizza's pretty good, but I think this is better. The only way I know that is if I compare the two.
You know, it's funny that you mentioned pizza and Italian food, particularly, especially in North America, that we are so accustomed to the normal Italian places.
Mm-hmm.
You know, pasta. I I have traveled to Italy, and I have eaten, and there is nothing to compare it in North America to it.
Right.
We say, oh yeah, we have Sicilians, and we have this, and we have that. People from everywhere in Italy, in North America. I said, yeah, but there is something about the seasoning, and there is something about the way they put that love
Yes.
into making it, that makes it just different.
Yes.
And the same is with people. You know, one of my pet peeve projects is a Latin festival that I do here in Toronto. It's a charity. We do. It's called Latinlicious. Latinlicious is not about people going to a park and having food from Latin America. No, it's about bringing English culture, North American culture, to go to the restaurants. And what we do is that we put music, art, folklore, and the food to tie it all together so that people experience everything that there is to experience about the Latin culture. Uh, and we do it with Mexican restaurants, and we do it with Venezuelan restaurants. You know, uh, and you see it more and more now in the Food Network and History Network, that they are focusing on more on the enjoyment and experiencing cultures than talking about the dynamics of the country.
Oh, 100%. We had a guest on the speaker spotlight today on the YBL speaker spotlight named Guillermo Navarrete. He's a Dr. G as we call him. And he said that there's been a study done about the Spanish. And he goes, why is it that Spaniards live so long? They smoke and they drink lots of wine, lots of sangria, and they smoke every day, but they're living longer than other industrialized nations. And they found out what the secret sauce was. You ready?
Go ahead.
Happiness. They're not as stressed, they're more laid back, they take siestas. They actually, it's part of the culture. And they found that when people are happy, it eliminates so much of the aging and so much of the distress that we get in our bodies.
It's funny because one of the things that I miss about Latin America, living in the continent itself, is that we had everyone goes to work, but in Latin America, no matter where you live and how you live, you go to your house for lunch.
Mm,
Lunch is the area when you meet with your family and you have the big meal of the day.
wow.
And you say, hold on, you break from your work schedule to go home to eat, and you go back to work after, and you say, yeah, because the kids come from school at lunch, and you can guide them, you can speak with them. They just unwind, and they go back to school, and they feel much better.
Sure. I mean, again, there's so many different things culturally. I mean, I look at it and go, so when we start to talk about acceptance, when we start to talk about there's all different types of judgment calls that are made. We don't criticize if someone has what's perceived as a disability. And that's something that's really important to understand. I have a niece who has Down syndrome. my niece Christina. Love you, Christina, if you're out there watching us. And I have a nephew, Max, who's autistic. And love you too, Maxie. Hope you are doing well in Oregon. And so the reason why I go there is it's very simple. People will ridicule what's different: skin, hair, and when you start to have internal references where someone has challenges with processing information, doesn't mean they're not smart. They're just smart in a different way. Doesn't mean that they're not skilled. They're just skilled in a different way. And I wonder if a fish thinks it's a failure if someone places it in a tree. And they're like, well, what do you mean? Fish don't belong in a tree. And I go, who says? That's like saying birds don't belong in the water, but there are birds that dive in the water, swim in the water, and so the point I'm trying to make is that, yeah. I mean, there's eagles, there's flying fish. There's actually fish that fly, and I go, okay, because they glide. I go, so my point is that it's only when we start to get critical of things and we start to judge and we start to compare. Because if your identity is wrapped up in being X, and I go, so how do we change some of that conversation, Eduardo? What are some of the things that people can do to become more inquisitive?
So I think, it's in human nature. And this is what I recommend to everybody. It's our human nature to be inquisitive about what surrounds us. Um, when I went to Texas, to Dallas to see you, it was very interesting. The first thing I told you is I love Texas barbecue, and you took me to a place in Dallas to eat barbecue. But one of the things that I noticed in the place, that most of the people that were eating at the place were not normal American citizens.
Right.
They were all from different areas of the country. They were all different ethnicities, and they were all eating different types of barbecue because that's what they wanted. And it was funny. You could see some, eating the spicy ones, and some eating the saucy sweet barbecue. And to me, culture and relations with people are meant to be understanding that idiosyncrasy of that culture, understanding why they do things the way they do. One of the biggest uh, lessons I learned in life in business was when I lived in Japan, about the way Japanese organizations treat their employees. They are not just employees; they are family to the organization.
Yes.
If one gets ill, the president of the company will go to see that person in the hospital or at home or whatever, because it disturbs the whole ecosystem of the operation. They don't have walls in the offices. Why? Because they bring the whole environment, and the president of the company sits at the front, but anyone can go up to the president and say, oh, I have an idea.
Yep.
Maybe it will work. And the president will say, sure, write me your idea and we'll take it into consideration and you can explain to us. But it's no one ever tells somebody that their ideas are not okay,
Right.
because you are part of that family, you are part of that organization. And technically that's one of the things that I did learn in Japan. But one of the things that my great grandfather told me, he said, never disregard anybody that associates with you. Their input only reinforces who you are as a person.
Definitely. It's
So,
important. Well, in that respect, the other side to that too is there's something to be said about authenticity and presence. Oftentimes, when people judge, And isn't it interesting? The ones that are the most critical are oftentimes the ones that say that they're the most conservative. And I go, why is that? Why is it that someone who claims that they're conservative and that they have these values and rules that are so earthy and so, majestic, that they're the ones that actually get offended the fastest? And I have a theory around it, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
So it's funny, and I'll give you a story from business, because when I started working in the US, I remember I was working at that time for MCI WorldCom, and a new immigrant in the US, with a, I would say, thick Spanish accent at the time. It's not as much now, but it was thick in those days. And I would call people, business people and businesses, to introduce new product. And the first thing that someone would tell me when I would call them was, "Can I speak someone that speaks English?" And I said, "Am I speaking a different language that you don't understand, sir?" And they were, "Yeah, but you are not from here. You don't understand. You don't understand me." I said, "Well, look, if you don't explain me what your issue is, I cannot I cannot start to understand your problem. So if you open up and tell me what you want, I will be able to assist you. And if I cannot resolve it, have it for I'll guarantee you that I'll find the answer for you from somebody else in my team
Hmm.
that is able to understand the issue. But give me that opportunity to realize and to understand your concerns." And I started infiltrating more into the way people started adopting my way, and they would start calling. What When I was working with them, I got sent to a job in Qatar, and it was funny because I told my boss, I said, it's not correct for me to go there. It's going. It's not because I am afraid to go there, but I am Jewish. This is the Arab world in the early 1980s.
Right.
This is not the world that we live in right now, where it, where anyone can meld into an ecosystem. And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Arabs and Jews don't. We get along, but we don't get along. We have differences culturally."
Right.
And he goes, "Well, go and see what you can do, because you are the only one that is available. Everybody else is attached, has family attached to them. You are the only single guy in our team." So I went, and happened to be that the company that we were working for was owned by the state, was owned by the heir to the throne of Qatar. And I started talking with the Prince of Qatar one evening, and he goes, "Oh, you are Arabic," because he looked at my last name and he thought I was Arabic. I said, "You could say that. My family comes from Syria, but I am from the other side of the coin." He goes, "What do you mean the other side?" I said, "I'm Jewish." And I explained to him, I said, "By the way, we are cousins. If, whether you like it or not, we are cousins because we come from brothers." And he goes, "Okay, explain me more." And we started talking about philosophy and religion.
Hmm.
And from that moment on, anytime he wanted a project came up, he would call my boss, the company, and say, "I want the Spanish Jewish guy that came over the last time." And now I am in business for myself. Now I have a direct connection to him, and he will only work with me in projects because he understands that I don't judge, that I actually like to learn the idiosyncrasies of the people that he has around him.
Right. Well, and I love that. Again, so you adopted being inquisitive, and that manifests over and crosses over into creating these amazing opportunities as well. Because I really do believe that people are looking for like-minded, like-hearted people. And we were discussing this today about acceptance, and part of it is it has to do with energy. And not to take this conversation in a woo-woo realm, but if someone asked and they said, Eduardo, if money was no object and you had all the resources in the world, where would you and your family live? And what would you say?
I haven't been, and here is the situation. I have been in Canada for almost 40 years now, and people have asked me that question: if you had all the resources in the world, where would you live?
Mhm.
And I said, I have left Canada many times, but I always come back to Canada.
Right.
And they go, why? I said, I don't know what attracts me to Canada so much, because there is the same problems that I find everywhere in the world. I find them in Canada as well. But
Sure.
the one thing that I think I love about Canada and Toronto, particularly as a home,
Hmm.
is the diversity of people that live in the city, that make you think, that make you want to be here and be in relations here with the the community.
That's beautiful. So this actually feeds right to my point, and that is you're in an environment that nurtures your happiness. You're in an environment where the energy, the energetic center, actually makes you feel less stressed and more compelled and complete due to that diversity, due to that opportunity, due to your inquisitiveness of being around other people. And I looked at it and said, okay, so someone asked, well, what would it be for you and Julie? And I said, probably someplace tropical and warm. Because there's this thing within us as well that becomes part of our, if we want to call it our development. And part of us culturally as well, too, Eduardo, which is if you've grown up in a hot desert and then I put you on a tropical island, I don't know that for most people that they'd be able to stay there forever. Why? Because there's something about that desert lifestyle that actually appeals to them. It's kind of like I find people that love like Sedona, Arizona, or they love Phoenix. They're not looking to be in Minnesota. They're like, going, heck no. They give names of people. They're called snowbirds. They leave Minnesota. They leave Chicago. They go to Arizona. They go to Palm Springs. They go to Florida, which I know you have a place. And so I think that's important to understand because when you have that complexity and the variety of you having a home in Florida, you having a home in Canada, that you get the best of both worlds.
But you know what? It's funny, and people might say that I discriminate against my own culture, but there is. I remember the days when I was a kid going to Miami, and you saw in the stores in Miami Beach that said signs that said Spanish spoken here. Now you go to Miami Beach and you see stores where in all the stores that says English spoken here, and you say, hold on, it cannot be that this has changed so much to
Right.
the point that we are losing. And I love my culture. I love being Hispanic. I love what we represent and how powerful we could be if how can I say, if we actually got together. One
Uh,
of the one of the liabilities of the Latin American community is that we are 22 countries that don't get along with each other.
mm,
Everyone has their own idiosyncrasy, everybody has their own opinions, and no one can make up their minds about working together for us. a common goal. There is 50 million Hispanics that live in the United States of America,
Hmm.
and we are still a minority.
Yes.
And it's sad that we don't have a voice because people are so into themselves. In a group of 50 million people, we should be able to be a powerful voice.
It is interesting. I mean, the same exists in other cultures as well. Arab world. You look at Asian world. I mean, Russia is part of Asia. You have India, Pakistan. You have China and Taiwan, the Philippines. I mean, I go on and on. Japan, Korea, and North Korea, South Korea, Vietnam, Cambodia. And there's such diversity, and each culture has its own value system. It has its own metrics around what they deem as important and necessary in order for them to express themselves. And isn't it interesting, though, that even in steeped in such rich culture, that it can be so comparative, where it creates this sense of insecurity and fear because people do things a different way. And that's a powerful testament to the human condition. When we start to go, okay, to your point, why can't we all just get along? When my kids were little, we taught them to be colorblind. And as they've gotten older, we've taught them to see the rainbow. Because said colorblind is not acknowledging someone's culture. Seeing the rainbow is being accepting of everyone's culture. And the premise is the exact opposite of one another. So we shifted that when they were young for a very simple reason. We started seeing too much cancel culture, where if someone was different, then they didn't belong. And to the point now where there can be lies that are told that, it's hard to know what's the truth and what's not the truth. People go, well, it's as simple as the nose on your face. I said, that's not true. It's not true. There, with AI and distortion and manipulation and media and social media in particular, it has become so dubious where the power of the few who choose to be outliers can actually affect the beauty of the many. And I said, but here's the deal. There's more of us than there are of them. There are so many more people who are looking for happiness, prosperity, connection, joy, and opportunity. And when we can find that diversity in each other, but there's a challenge with that. And I'd love to get your thought on this. And that is, what would you say to someone who changes their identity to try and fit in, who takes on a false narrative as to who they are, just so that way they feel that they won't offend anyone?
I I don't agree with that. Uh, you should never change your who you are to mold into something that you are not. Uh, I see so many Hispanics in Canada that try to avoid speaking Spanish
Mm,
for the because they want to fit in society. And I said, society has to fit, allow you in because you are different, not the other way around. And that's what means to have a multicultural carpet of different people with different ethnicities that we can meld, and we can see kids of different ethnicities mixing together. And it's funny because I go back to the wonderful days of watching TV and watching Mr. George George Garcia a comedian that always said, "You'll never get rid of the Latins because we mix with everybody."
It's true. I mean, it's funny. I was watching the comedian Joe Coy, and same thing. He's Filipino, and he goes, but Filipinos are like 50% Latino, and it's an interesting mix because of just the blending that occurred over time. And to your point, there's whole ideology of critical race theory, and that there's all these different races, and I go, yes, and they're quickly melding together. There are people who aren't just one or two things, they're like six or seven things. And I go, oh, well, to your point, they're Scandinavian mixed in with European, mixed in with Eastern Bloc, mixed in with uh, North African, mixed in with, uh, it could be like the Pacific Islands. It's like there's so many different areas where people have migrated. And that's the human condition, is because we're adventurers. So my mother told me when I was a kid, she said, you realize that you have family in Mexico and Brazil that are Japanese. And I'm like, wait, what? Why? And she said, well, on my mother's side, my obacha, my grandmother, her uncles fled. She was an only child. My grandfather was an only child, but their uncles fled to Latin America to avoid getting indoctrinated into the World War. And I was like, really? She goes, oh yeah. So you can go down there and there's villages that are just filled with a bunch of people that look Asian. In Brazil, there's a bunch of, there's actually people that have Japanese last names, and they're blended now with the indigenous and all the other cultures, but they look very Asian. And it's like, holy smokes.
Yeah, Peru has the same situation. Peru is a lot of
Yeah, their president, their former president was Japanese, right? Or had a Japanese
Yeah.
last name. And so I look at that and go, gosh, isn't it such a beautiful thing that we can have all this diversity? And on the other side, that there's still so much discrimination. And I wonder at times, because I was never raised with that lens. I was never raised with that. I mean, and my dad's a redhead, blue-eyed Irishman. My mom is 4'11 and a half, 85 pounds, portable, like very petite Japanese woman. And I go, okay, how did that even happen? And then, yeah, we don't need to go down that path. But I will just say what happened was, and it was very neat, is to see that my Japanese grandparents allowed my mother and my father to marry out of love. And I'm also reminded that when you take people out of their culture, that it can change their perceptions as to what life should be like. So we used to go back and visit Japan, and it's a very strong part of my mother's culture because she's first generation. And I think that part of that, I believe this to my core, that there are things that she loved about being a US citizen, and there's other stuff that she was not quite as enthused about because she missed some things.
Yeah, and it's funny because I look at the way my kids are growing up now with so much phobia,
Mm.
and I tell my kids, I said, guys, there is different people everywhere. There is different ways of looking at things, but you have the great honor that you are born into a family that is so diverse that no one can tell you you are not from here.
Right.
And wherever you go, I mean, let's talk about what you were talking about, the melding of the cultures. So as you said at the beginning of the show, I had the esteemed pleasure of attending the World Cup in Qatar this past summer.
Yes.
And um, one of the things that shocked me and I should say shocked, because I don't get shocked anymore about culture. But in the German team, there's a gentleman, a player by the name of Michal Goldberg. Michal Goldberg was born in Sudan,
Oh,
of Sudanese parents. His parents put him up for adoption, and he was adopted by a German family.
okay.
Now, when you look at the program and you don't know the man, you say Michal Goldberg, blue-eyed, blonde, white, very tall, and strong arms. You looked at this. When I went to the locker room, I started looking for someone that I was looking for. You know, all of a sudden,
You had an image, right,
I
in your
had an
head.
image in my head of what a Michal Goldberg would look like. And I said, hmm. So I approached the director of press relations for the team, and I said, I'm looking for Michal Goldberg. I want to interview him. And he goes, there's his locker. And I looked. He was, it was about 15 steps from me. And I looked at it. I said, no, that cannot be Michal Goldberg. He goes, yeah, that's Michal Goldberg. And I said, how does Michal Goldberg become black, 5'11", and looks like a train? He goes, he was adopted by a family in Germany. He's from Sudan. And I said, okay, now I have heard everything. And he is a German national player, footballer.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting that you say that, because the onus is that we have a perception. I just saw this rugby team in the UK, and there's a player. His last name is Smith, and he's half Filipino and half English. Well, when he was young, his family relocated to England, and but he looks Filipino. Like, he doesn't look like any of the other English players on the pitch, and he's number 10, which is like kind of like I'll say uh, the ringleader. You know, they're very important player on the pitch. So I share this because I was like going, okay, I don't know if there's been any more diversity in the world than what we've seen in soccer. You know, and I apologize for you Europeans that are listening. Football. Um, And so I'll differentiate European football in comparison to American football, because I know it can get confusing. But I started looking at that and going, I see so many players that when they're playing for their national team, and every now and then you'll see someone, you're like going, okay, French team. And you can tell, like Mbappe and all these other players, that of other ethnicities and descent, right? And it's like going, wow, that is so different. And then you can see environments that they don't have much cultural diversity at all. So I'll look at like the Russian teams, or I'll look at the Swedish team, and you're like going, wow, 99.9% of them are blonde hair, blue eyes. The Russian team, 99.9% of them are like light brown hair, brown eyes. And I'm not saying they're all like that, but why do I go there? And within cultures, there are certain cultures that have applauded diversity, and there have been other cultures that applaud purity. My Japanese culture was one of those. It wasn't often as a kid that I would see other people who were mixed Japanese. And I thought that was very interesting. At least when I was a kid, it was different. It was different.
You know, it's funny, and I want to keep the topic going because it's an interesting, because you are bringing, think of Germany's team, or the French national team, and we put it back at the 1936 World Cup in in Munich.
Okay.
How would that? How would this team now be looked in the eyes of the people from that era?
Oh, I mean,
Would there have been a world war if that had happened in those days?
hmm,
Because
that's a
how can you how can you judge another group of people the wrong way, a misconception, if your own national team has a composition that doesn't make sense to the leaders of the country?
right, right. Well, I mean, to your point, isn't it interesting that when people have an ideology, because Adolf Hitler was brown hair, brown eyes, yet he said that the supreme race was blonde hair, blue eyes. And it's like, okay. So I don't know. I look at it and go, I think that this started a long time ago, because if you think all the way back to the days of Caesar and Rome
Yeah.
and the adoption of different gladiators and different, um, I'll say, athletes from Africa and from Spain and from all over the world, because those ports were the ones filled with riches, that they started to have a lot of different relationships that started to occur. And no different than Cleopatra, like right in Egypt. They said that she wasn't Egyptian, that she was actually of Middle Eastern descent.
Yeah.
And it's like, wait, what? How could that be? And then she had a relationship with Mark Anthony. And so it's very interesting when we start to look at the dynamics of history and what love and uh, energetic connection can do. I mean, I know as we're starting to wrap up with time, I'll offer this, and I'd love to get your insight on this, my friend. And that is, how disarming is it when energy is being shared amongst people? Because you can have people all from the same culture, all from even the same family, all the same genetics, and yet they don't always get along.
Oh, that's a definite. Uh, I can tell you that from my own family. I mean, me and my brother are totally opposites in the way we think. My brother is, although he wasn't born here, he grew up here all his life, and he doesn't have any patterns of Hispanic culture in his blood. Let's put it that way, because he
Okay.
acts as if he was born in Canada. He is blonde, blue eyed, uh, well, turquoise eyes, and and he acts as if he was a Canadian or a North American bred boy in the way he thinks. He's very conservative in the way of his thinking. He
Mm,
doesn't. He sticks to his own instead of melding. Oh, he'll go to eat anywhere, but he will not meld with the community with those cultures.
interesting. Does he have a Spanish accent?
He doesn't have a Spanish accent. He has no accent at all, and it's funny because when he goes back home, sometimes we had to go back home because my dad passed away. The
Right.
the people down there were saying, "Who's the gringo?" And I go, "He's not a gringo. He was born here."
Wow.
And people said, "Well, he speaks like a gringo. He has an English accent for Spanish."
Interesting.
And I said, "That's the difference that an upbringing makes." I never, to me, family is number one. To my brother, his immediate family is number one. So his wife, his kids, my mom, my dad. You know, to me, I don't distinguish between my brother and my cousins. To me,
Mm,
everybody is family.
right.
I want to have a connection with everybody. So that's where we differ from each other. Our political views are completely the opposites. Uh, Although we actually were involved in the same political party, we had different views in how the party should be run, and
Wow.
it's funny, like really, really, really funny in that regards. And it
So
makes
that
you
brings
think.
up a good point, though. It does. Because you're going, wait, same genetics, same upbringing, same family, and yet you can have such polar opposite belief systems and even energetic flow. And this is one of the reasons why they say choose your friends, love your family.
Exactly.
So, wow, Eduardo. I mean, we could go on and on about this. I mean, it's such a fascinating conversation. I just want to thank you because you're so often behind the scenes, and you'll make commentary when we're on the shows, and I love that. And just know I'm grateful for the opportunity, grateful for us to be able to have this forum, to be able to share with all of you beautiful folks at home. And again, thank you for just joining us on this amazing adventure together. The show can be heard on the Spanglish Radio Network. Please check us out for all the news and all the programming. Spanglish World, watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. We look forward to seeing you all again soon. Thank you, my brother.
Thank you.